Picture this scene. You're pulling into the parking lot of your family reunion. Kids are running around playing tag, aunts and uncles are carrying casserole dishes. There's a lineup of random SUVs and minivans parked in neat rows. You step out of your old car, nothing fancy, just a reliable 12-year-old sedan that's been with you through thick and thin. You're wearing casual clothes, maybe jeans and a t-shirt, just trying to blend in and have a peaceful day with family. But before you can even grab the dish you brought from the back seat, your brother spots you from across the parking lot. He doesn't wave, he doesn't smile, he just stops in his tracks, points at your car, and says, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "Still driving that old car?" Then he laughs, that condescending laugh that makes your stomach twist, and adds, "Some people never upgrade." The cousins, standing near him, start chuckling. Someone pulls out their phone like they're about to record the roast session. You feel every pair of eyes in that parking lot turn toward you and your weathered sedan with its faded paint and slightly dented bumper. Your face heats up, but you just lock the car door calmly and think to yourself, "Old car. Brother, if you only knew what was sitting in my garage right now, if you could see behind that closed door at my house where the total collection value is approximately $892,000, you'd understand that I don't upgrade cars, I upgrade my entire lifestyle. I just do it quietly without needing to announce every purchase to the family group chat." But here's where this story gets really good, and this is why you need to stick around until the end. The very next day after that reunion, after he made his little joke in front of everyone, my brother came over to my house. I invited him casually, no big deal, just said I wanted to show him something. When that garage door started rolling up, when car after car appeared in the lineup, when he realized he was standing in front of almost $900,000 worth of automotive excellence, the only sound louder than those engines was the absolute silence coming from his mouth, the same mouth that had been so confident yesterday about my supposed lack of upgrades. Yeah, that mouth had nothing to say anymore. Let me take you back so you understand the full context of this sibling rivalry. My brother and I have been competing since we were kids. It started with grades, then moved to clothes, then phones, then jobs, then houses, and inevitably cars. But here's the difference between us. He's always been about the flash, the show, the performance for other people. He's the guy who gets the newest iPhone on release day and makes sure everyone at the family dinner sees it. He's the guy who leases a luxury car he can barely afford just so he can park it in front of restaurants and feel important. Everything he does is calculated for maximum visibility and maximum approval from others. His entire identity is wrapped up in what other people think when they see his possessions. Me? I took a different path. Years ago, when I was just starting out, I drove whatever I could afford. I had a beat-up old car that got me from point A to point B, and that was enough. My brother would make comments constantly. Every family gathering, every time we crossed paths, he had something to say. You need a real job if you ever want to upgrade from that junk. Or, seriously, when are you going to sell that embarrassment and get something decent? Or, my personal favorite, you're making the whole family look bad driving around in that thing. The family would laugh along with him, treating my practical choice like it was some kind of character flaw, like I was too poor or too clueless to know better. What nobody knew, what I never bothered to explain because I didn't owe anyone an explanation, was that I was building something. I got into a high-income field, whether it was tech or trading or business, doesn't matter which specifically, but the point is I started making serious money. Not the kind of money you flash around, but the kind of money that gives you options, that lets you invest in things you actually care about. And what I cared about were cars, not as status symbols, not as props for Instagram photos, but as actual machines, as pieces of engineering and history and art. I started building a collection quietly, methodically, choosing each vehicle for a specific reason. I'm talking about a proper garage collection, 4 to 6 cars, depending on the year, carefully curated, stored in a climate-controlled space. Maybe a restored classic from the 60s or 70s, something with real heritage and craftsmanship, worth somewhere between $120,000 and $150,000. Maybe a modern sports car, something that makes your heart race when you press the accelerator, valued around $180,000 to $250,000. A luxury GT or high-end SUV for when I wanted comfort with performance, another $100,000 to $150,000. And then a few mid-range builds, weekend toys, tuners, project cars that I worked on myself, each one special in its own way. When you add it all up, when you calculate current market values and factor in the work I've put into restoration and maintenance, you're looking at a total collection worth approximately $892,000. But here's the thing, nobody in my family knew about this. I didn't post about it on social media, I didn't bring it up at family dinners, I didn't invite people over for garage tours. I kept that part of my life completely separate because it was mine, not theirs. And I kept driving my old daily driver, that same beat-up sedan my brother loved to mock because it was practical, it was reliable, it was paid off. It drew zero attention, which meant I could move through life without constantly being asked about my finances or my choices. That old car was my shield, my way of staying under the radar while I built something incredible behind closed doors. My brother thought my old car meant I was stuck, struggling, unable to upgrade. He had no idea that I was choosing to drive it, that the real toys were hidden away in a garage he'd never been invited to see. To him, the visible car was the only car, and therefore my entire worth could be judged by that one vehicle. He never asked questions, he never got curious about what else might be going on in my life. He just made assumptions based on surface-level observations and turned those assumptions into jokes at my expense. For years, I let it slide. I figured, let him think what he wants. His opinion doesn't change my reality. But there's only so many times you can be publicly mocked before you decide enough is enough. The family reunion was supposed to be a nice day. That's what I kept telling myself as I drove there in my old sedan, the same car I'd been driving for over a decade. I pulled into the parking lot, found a spot near the back because I didn't need to make a grand entrance, and started to get out. The lot was full of typical family cars, nothing particularly impressive, just practical vehicles that got people where they needed to go. My car fit in just fine, which was exactly the vibe I was going for. I wasn't there to show off. I was there to eat some good food, catch up with relatives I actually liked, and hopefully avoid any drama. But of course, my brother had other plans. I saw him across the lot, standing next to his recently leased SUV, something shiny and new with that fresh-off-the-lot gleam. He was showing it off to a couple of cousins, pointing out features, probably talking about the payment plan he could barely afford. When he spotted me getting out of my car, I saw his face light up, not with happiness, but with opportunity. He'd found his punching bag for the day. He walked over with this exaggerated swagger, and before I could even close my car door, he launched into it. "No way," he said, loud enough for everyone within 50 feet to hear. "You still have this thing? This exact same car?" He circled around it like he was inspecting a museum piece, shaking his head in mock disbelief. "At your age? Come on, man, upgrade already. You look broke driving around in this." The cousins nearby started laughing. One of them pulled out their phone, and I'm pretty sure they were recording, probably planning to share it in the family group chat later. My face heated up. I felt my shoulders tense up. I forced a half smile, trying to play it off like it didn't bother me, but inside I was calculating. I was thinking about my garage at home. I was thinking about the lineup of vehicles sitting there, each one worth more than his leased SUV by a significant margin. I was thinking about the combined value, $892,000, and how that number would sound if I said it out loud right now in this parking lot. But I didn't. Instead, I just locked my car, grabbed my dish, and walked toward the reunion hall. As I passed my brother, I said quietly, just to him, "You should come by my place tomorrow. I've been working on something you might be interested in." He gave me this condescending smile, like he was humoring a child, and said, "Sure, yeah, I'll check out your project car or whatever." He had no idea what he'd just agreed to. Let me take you back so you understand the full context of this sibling rivalry. My brother and I have been competing since we were kids. It started with grades, then moved to clothes, then phones, then jobs, then houses, and inevitably cars. But here's the difference between us. He's always been about the flash, the show, the performance for other people. He's the guy who gets the newest iPhone on release day and makes sure everyone at the family dinner sees it. He's the guy who leases a luxury car he can barely afford just so he can park it in front of restaurants and feel important. Everything he does is calculated for maximum visibility and maximum approval from others. His entire identity is wrapped up in what other people think when they see his possessions. Me? I took a different path. Years ago, when I was just starting out, I drove whatever I could afford. I had a beat-up old car that got me from point A to point B, and that was enough. My brother would make comments constantly.
Whole setup. This wasn't a hobby that I did casually. This was a passion that I'd invested serious time, money, and energy into. The collection itself was diverse, carefully chosen over years. There was a classic restored muscle car, something from the golden age of American automotive design, maybe a late 60s or early 70s model that I'd either bought already restored or painstakingly brought back to life myself. Current market value on something like that, done right, easily sits between $120,000 and $150,000. These aren't just cars you drive, they're rolling pieces of history that appreciate over time if you maintain them properly. Then there was a modern sports car, something with contemporary engineering and performance that could embarrass vehicles costing twice as much. Depending on the brand and specs, that's another $180,000 to $250,000 right there. I also had a luxury Grand Tour or high-end SUV, something that combined comfort with capability, the kind of vehicle you'd take on a cross-country road trip or drive to a business meeting when you wanted to arrive in style without being obnoxious about it. Another $100,000 to $150,000 in value. And then there were the weekend toys, the project cars, maybe a couple of Japanese tuners or European hot hatches, vehicles that weren't necessarily expensive when I bought them, but that I'd modified and maintained to a point where they were worth significantly more than their purchase price. Each one had a story, a purpose, a place in the collection. When you added everything up, when you looked at current market appraisals and fair values, the total was approximately $892,000 worth of automotive passion sitting in one space. But my brother had never seen any of this. None of my family had, except maybe one or two close friends who shared my enthusiasm for cars. I didn't advertise this part of my life on social media. I didn't post photos with captions like "new addition to the collection" or "just another day in the garage." I kept it private because it was personal, because I didn't need external validation, and because, honestly, I knew it would create drama in a family that already had enough of that. My daily driver, that old sedan my brother loved to mock, served a perfect purpose. It was my stealth mode, my way of moving through the world without attracting attention or questions. Nobody asks a guy driving a 12-year-old sedan how much money he makes or what he spends it on. But show up in a 6-figure sports car and suddenly everyone's a financial advisor with opinions about your choices. So my brother went through life thinking he knew my whole story. He saw the old car, made assumptions about my financial situation, and never dug deeper because the surface-level observation confirmed what he wanted to believe, that he was doing better than me, that his choices were superior, that he'd won some imaginary competition we'd been having since childhood. Meanwhile, I spent my weekends in that garage, starting engines that cost more than his annual salary, detailing paint that had more layers of protection than his entire lease agreement had pages in. The disconnect between his perception and my reality was massive, and honestly, I'd been content to leave it that way. But after that parking lot humiliation, after he made me his public punchline one more time, I decided it was time for a correction. That night, after the reunion, I sat in my living room thinking about how to handle the next day. My brother had agreed to come over, though he clearly thought he was humoring me, probably expecting to see some half-finished project car on jack stands in a messy garage. He had no idea what he was walking into. I could have just opened the garage door and let the cars speak for themselves, but I wanted this to be a moment, a carefully orchestrated reveal that he wouldn't forget. This wasn't about being petty or rubbing his nose in anything. This was about establishing a boundary, about making it clear that his assumptions and his public mockery were based on incomplete information, and that going forward, he needed to think twice before using me as a punchline. I texted him the next morning confirming he was still coming by. He responded with a casual, "Yeah, I'll swing by after lunch," like he was doing me a favor. Perfect. That gave me time to make sure the garage was presentation ready. I went out there and did a final check. All the cars were in their positions, arranged so that when the door opened, the full lineup would be visible at once. Some had covers that I pulled halfway back, creating a sense of mystery and anticipation. The lighting was set up to highlight key features, chrome details, aggressive stances, the works. The space smelled like high-grade fuel and carefully maintained rubber, and that specific scent of well-kept leather interiors. Everything was perfect. My plan was simple but effective. When he arrived, I'd let him see the daily driver first, parked in the driveway where it always was. Let him have one more moment of superiority, one more internal chuckle about his struggling sibling. Then I'd walk him around to the side gate to the entrance of the real garage, the one he'd never seen. I wouldn't say much. I wouldn't hype it up or prepare him. I'd just press the remote, let the door start its slow mechanical rise, and watch his face as the reality sank in. Sometimes the best statements don't need words. Sometimes you just need to present the facts and let them do their work. I also thought about what I'd say after the reveal. I didn't want to gloat or be cruel, but I needed to make my point clear. Years of jokes, years of public humiliation, years of being treated like the family failure when it came to cars, all of that needed to be addressed. But I'd do it calmly, matter-of-factly, without emotion or anger, just pure truth delivered in a way he couldn't dismiss or spin. The garage would establish credibility. My words would establish boundaries. Together, they'd reset the dynamic between us, whether he liked it or not. Right on schedule, I heard my brother's car pull into the driveway around 2 in the afternoon. I watched from the window as he parked next to my old sedan, that same car he'd mocked yesterday. He got out, looked at it, and I could see him smirking even from inside the house. He was probably rehearsing another joke in his head, something about how he still hadn't gotten rid of the rust bucket. I opened the front door before he could knock. "Hey," I said casually, "thanks for coming." He gave me that patronizing smile, the one that said he was being generous with his time. "No problem," he said. "So, what's this project you wanted to show me?" Instead of answering, I just gestured for him to follow me. We walked around the side of the house toward a larger structure, a garage that was separate from the main building. It had a big rolling door, the industrial kind, currently closed and giving no hint of what was behind it. My brother looked confused for a second, probably wondering why we were going to what looked like a storage unit. I pulled out the remote from my pocket, aimed it at the door, and pressed the button without saying a word. The mechanism engaged with a low mechanical hum, and the door began its slow mechanical ascent. The first thing that became visible was a front bumper, aggressive and low to the ground, with distinctive headlights that anyone who knows cars would recognize as expensive. My brother's smirk faltered, his eyebrows furrowed slightly, like he was trying to process what he was seeing. The door continued rising, revealing more, a full car, then a second one behind it, then a third, then a fourth. The space opened up to show the complete lineup, each vehicle positioned to maximize visual impact. Different colors, different styles, different eras, all united by one common theme. They were all exceptional, and they were all mine. My brother stood there frozen, his mouth slightly open. The cocky energy he had just seconds ago had completely evaporated. "Wait," he said, his voice much quieter than usual. "These are all yours?" I nodded, keeping my tone completely casual like this was no big deal. "Yeah, I keep the daily driver for, daily stuff. These are just when I feel like actually enjoying the drive." I let that sink in for a moment, then added, "Based on the last appraisals, the total value of everything you're looking at is around $892,000. Hope that qualifies as a real car by your standards." He didn't respond immediately. He was too busy walking slowly into the garage, looking at each vehicle up close, reading badges, peering through windows at custom interiors, noticing details that confirmed these weren't replicas or cheap imitations. These were legitimate, high-value automobiles, each one maintained to museum quality. I could see the gears turning in his head, trying to reconcile this reality with the image he'd built of me as his unsuccessful sibling who couldn't afford to upgrade from a 12-year-old sedan. Finally, he let out a weak laugh and said, "You're joking, right? This is a friend's collection or something?" I shook my head. "Nope, all mine. Built it over the past several years. Didn't see the need to announce it to the family group chat every time I made an acquisition." To really drive the point home, I walked over to one of the sports cars, grabbed the keys from a lockbox on the wall, and started it up. The engine roared to life with a sound that made the whole garage vibrate, that deep, aggressive note that only comes from serious performance machinery. My brother literally took a step back. The confidence he had yesterday in the parking lot when he was making fun of my old car in front of everyone was completely gone. Its place was something I'd never really seen on his face before. Humility, maybe even a touch of respect, and definitely a whole lot of regret about every joke he'd ever made. After I turned the engine off, the silence in the garage felt heavy. My brother was still processing, still looking around like he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. Finally, he turned to me and said, "Why didn't you tell anyone about this? Why let everyone think you were still struggling?" There was an edge to his voice, something between accusation and confusion. I took a breath and decided this was the moment to address everything that had been building up for years. "Because I don't owe anyone a detailed breakdown of my finances or my purchases," I said calmly. "I built this collection because I love cars, not because I needed to prove something to the family or compete with you." He tried to deflect. "You let me clown you in front of everyone yesterday. You could have said something." I looked at him directly. "I could have, but here's the thing. For years, you've been making jokes about my old car, telling me I need a real job, saying I'm embarrassing the family. You've done it at every reunion, every holiday, every time we're in the same room. And I never responded because I didn't think I needed to. I thought eventually you'd grow up and realize that what people drive doesn't define their worth. But yesterday, when you did it again in that parking lot, loud enough for everyone to hear, turning me into your punchline for cheap laughs, I decided maybe it was time you saw the full picture." He looked uncomfortable now, shifting his weight from foot to foot. "I was just joking around," he said weakly. "That's what brothers do." I shook my head. "No, that's what insecure people do. They put others down to feel better about themselves. You weren't joking around. You were trying to establish dominance, to make sure everyone knew you were doing better than me. But you based all of that on assumptions. You saw one car, the one I chose to drive daily for practical reasons, and you decided that car represented my entire life. You never asked questions. You never got curious about what else might be going on. You just made assumptions and turned them into weapons." I gestured around the garage. "This collection isn't here to impress you or anyone else. I didn't build it for validation. I built it because it's something I'm passionate about, something I can afford, something that brings me joy. But since you've spent years publicly questioning my choices and my success, I figured you deserved to see the evidence that maybe, just maybe, you don't know as much about my life as you think you do." My brother was quiet for a long moment. I could see him struggling with his ego, with the realization that he'd been wrong, with the embarrassment of having been so loudly incorrect about me for so long. Finally, I laid down the boundary I'd been planning. "Here's what's going to happen going forward," I said, my voice steady but firm. "You're never going to make another comment about my car, my job, or my financial situation. Not at reunions, not at holidays, not in the family group chat, nowhere. We can be brothers who respect each other, or we can be strangers who happen to share parents. But this pattern of you using me as your measuring stick for your own success, it ends today." He opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, then closed it. He looked around the garage one more time, then back at me. "Since when could you afford all this?" he asked, and for the first time there was genuine curiosity in his voice instead of judgment. "Since I focused on building a life instead of performing one. Maybe try it sometime." So let me tell you what I learned from this whole experience. And I'm talking directly to you now, because this lesson applies to way more situations than just sibling rivalry over cars. People will judge your entire existence based on the one thing they can see, especially if that one thing confirms what they already want to believe about you. My brother saw my old car and decided that was the complete story of my life. He never asked about my career, my investments, my hobbies, my actual financial situation. He just made assumptions based on surface-level observation and then treated those assumptions as fact, and he did it loudly, publicly, confidently, because in his mind there was no possibility he was wrong. Here's the truth. The most valuable things in your life are often the things you keep private. They're not on social media, they're not announced at family gatherings, they're tucked away behind closed doors, literally in my case, protected from judgment and envy and unnecessary attention. I could have been driving a brand new luxury car every day to prove to my brother and the rest of the family that I'd made it, but why would I do that? Why would I let their opinions dictate my choices? The old sedan served my needs perfectly. It was reliable, paid off, invisible. It let me move through the world without attracting questions or creating drama. Meanwhile, my real passion, my real investment, my real pride sat safely in a garage where it couldn't be touched by anyone's judgment. The second lesson is about boundaries and respect. For years, I tolerated my brother's jokes because I thought ignoring them was the mature response. I thought not engaging meant I was above it all. But there's a difference between being mature and being a doormat. Maturity isn't about absorbing disrespect quietly. It's about choosing your moments, about knowing when to respond and how to respond effectively. That parking lot moment at the reunion was my line. He crossed it, and I decided it was time to correct the record, not out of spite or revenge, but out of basic self-respect. Nobody should have to endure constant public mockery from family, especially when that mockery is based on ignorance. And finally, here's the most important part. You don't owe anyone a performance of your success. You don't need to announce every win, every purchase, every milestone. Your life isn't a highlight reel for other people's consumption. Build what you want to build, achieve what you want to achieve, and do it on your terms, in your time, without needing approval or applause from people who wouldn't support you anyway. My brother wanted me to be the struggling sibling because it made him feel superior. When I refused to play that role, when I just quietly built my own path, he had no idea what to do with that information. His entire framework for understanding me was wrong, and that made him uncomfortable. That day at the family reunion, my brother stood in a parking lot and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Still driving that old car." He thought he was landing a joke, establishing dominance, reminding everyone of the hierarchy he'd created in his head. The next day, when he stood in my garage surrounded by $892,000 worth of carefully curated automotive excellence, he tried to ask the question again, but the words wouldn't come out. Because standing in front of that collection, watching those engines start, seeing the proof that I'd been succeeding quietly while he'd been performing loudly, he finally understood something important. The person who feels the need to constantly announce their success is usually the one who's least secure about it, and the person who stays quiet, they're the ones you should never underestimate. Because when that garage door finally opens, when the truth finally comes to light, it's not just going to be surprising, it's going to be unforgettable.